3 weeks ago, on a Saturday morning that started out like any other, I was out by the shop grinding rust off an old disc harrow when I heard tires on gravel. Not the slow, familiar roll of the feed truck driver who knows to honk once and wait. This was a convoy. From matching white SUVs, all with those little magnetic signs on the doors that read Magnolia Springs Homeowners Association, Community, Standards Division. They stopped in a perfect line at my front gate like they were about to film a commercial. Out spilled a dozen people in identical navy golf shirts, khaki pants pressed sharp enough to cut glass, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my first pickup. They had clipboards. They had signs. They had attitude. I set the angle grinder down, wiped my hands on a rag that used to be red a long time ago, and walked the quarter-mile to the gate at the same pace I use when I'm in no particular hurry. The dogs trotted alongside, curious, but not barking yet. By the time I got there, the loudest one, a woman with a blonde bob so stiff it could deflect bullets, was already yelling through the bars. Mr. Harlan. Mr. Harlan, we need this gate opened immediately. This is an official community safety inspection. I leaned against the pipe rail, hooked my thumbs in my belt loops, and let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Morning, ma'am. Y'all are a long way from your stucco walls. Something I can help you with. She wasn't used to being answered slow. Her mouth opened and closed twice before the words caught up. We have documented complaints about the condition of your property being visible from Magnolia Springs. Fencing, debris, abandoned vehicles. I looked past her at the perfectly manicured line of SUVs, then down the fence line that's been straight and tight since 1974. Lady, the only thing visible from your subdivision is my east pasture and a whole lot of sky. If the sky offends you, I suggest curtains. That earned a couple of gasps. The man standing next to her, tall, late 40s, the kind of tan you get from a booth, not the sun, stepped forward with a smile that never reached his eyes. Sir, we're prepared to be reasonable. The board is willing to compensate you generously for temporary construction access through your south gate. Concrete trucks start Monday. It would only be a few weeks. I'd already turned down Diane Whitaker's first 3 offers. The last one came in a certified letter with a check big enough to make a lesser man blink. I sent the check back shredded inside the same envelope. I looked him square. This road was graded by my granddaddy Walt Harlan and a mule named Junebug the year the Astros played their first game. It's on my deed. It's paid for with my taxes. And it sure as hell isn't for sale or rent. The fake smile cracked. You're being unreasonable. No, sir. I'm being clear. And right now y'all are on the wrong side of a locked gate that says Harlan Clear across the top. That makes this private property. Turn those pretty trucks around before I decide to call the sheriff and ruin everybody's Saturday. They left, but not before the blonde Bob snapped a dozen pictures of my gate, my house, my dogs, and me. I stood there until the last SUV disappeared in a cloud of caliche dust. Then I went inside, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and started making phone calls of my own. That was the opening shot. They had no idea what they'd walked into. My name is Jack Harlan. I'm 61 years old, born in the back bedroom of this same limestone house during a norther so cold the water troughs froze solid. My granddaddy Walt raised me after my folks were killed on Highway 21 outside Luling when I was 9. He taught me 3 things that have served me better than any college degree ever could. How to weld anything to anything, how to read the sky before the weatherman opens his mouth, and that a man's word and a man's boundary are the same damn thing. This place is 12 acres of post oak, cedar, cactus, and memories. The house leans a little west because Walt said buildings ought to face the prevailing wind like everything else that survives out here. The workshop is longer than the house because every time Granddaddy got mad at the world, he added another bay. Inside you'll find tools older than most states and a 1954 Ford tractor that still runs because stubbornness is apparently genetic. The south gate, the one they wanted, opens onto the only piece of ground flat and dry enough to carry a concrete truck after a rain. It's been that way since Walt cut the road with a borrowed maintainer and a borrowed mule. He laid gravel 6 inches at a time with a drag blade behind that same Ford tractor while my grandma kept lemonade coming in mason jars. When it was done, he welded Harlan across the top rail in letters 2 feet tall and told me, "Boy, a gate that carries your name better stay closed unless you open it yourself." I've honored that promise for 40 years. Then came Magnolia Springs Estates. They broke ground the year the price of beef finally climbed back over $1 a pound. One day there was nothing but mesquite and cow pies where the back of their subdivision is now. 6 months later there were 80 half-finished houses, a man-made pond full of Home Depot goldfish, and a 30-foot stucco wall painted the exact shade of a Starbucks cup. They name the streets things like Winding Creek Lane and Whispering Pine Trail despite the fact there's no creek, and the only pines are the plastic ones on the entrance sign. Diane Whitaker moved into the biggest house on the highest lot and declared herself president for life of the HOA before the drywall was even taped. She's the kind of woman who can smile while she's ruining your day and make you feel like you're the rude one for noticing. Word is she used to sell timeshares in Branson. That explains a lot. The first time she came to my gate she was alone, driving a white Escalade with a license plate that read MSHOA 1. She wore a blazer in 98-degree heat and carried a leather folder thick enough to stop a bullet. She offered to buy an easement for $250,000 cash. I told her I wasn't interested. She upped it to $400,000. I told her the land wasn't for sale at any price. She smiled that timeshare smile and said, "Everything has a price, Mr. Harlan. We'll be in touch." I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. 10 days later, the 3 polo shirts showed up asking for temporary volunteer access for construction traffic. I said no. They left threatening escalation. That night, somebody scattered flyers all up and down the county road claiming I was a public safety hazard. The next morning, I added 2 more cameras and a second master lock the size of a coffee can. At 2:31 a.m. on a Wednesday, the motion alert chimed. I rolled out of bed, pulled on yesterday's jeans, and watched the live feed on my phone while I walked barefoot to the shop. 2 figures in black hoodies and ski masks were working on the south gate with a battery-powered angle grinder. Sparks showered like the 4th of July. One of them had a fake badge pinned to his chest that read Magnolia Springs Enforcement Division, a title that exists only in Diane Whitaker's fever dreams. The other held a folded paper he kept shining a red flashlight on. Looked like somebody's idea of a court order printed off a home computer. I let them grind for 3 full minutes. Long enough for every camera to get clean facial recognition, audio, and the license plate of the pickup they left idling on the shoulder. Then I flipped on every floodlight I own. 500 watts of LED daylight turned night into noon. The grinder stopped mid-spark. Both men froze like deer on asphalt. I hit the intercom button wired to the shop PA system. My voice came out calm and loud enough to wake half the county. Evening, gentlemen. Y'all picked the wrong gate. Before they could decide whether to run or finish the job, I heard gravel popping under heavy tires. 2 Caldwell County deputies crested the hill running code 3, reds and blues painting the cedars like a disco. The grinder boy dropped his tool and started yelling before the first cruiser even stopped. This is authorized. We have paperwork, Diane said. His partner punched him in the ribs hard enough to be heard on the audio track. Too late. Deputy Rodriguez, same one who fished me out of the stock tank when I was 12, stepped out with his hand on his holster and a grin he couldn't quite hide. Hands where I can see them, fellas. Let's have a conversation about authorized. They found the fake court order, the fake badges, 2 burner phones, and a receipt for the grinder from a Home Depot in San Marcos paid for with an HOA credit card. The singer sang some more on the ride to Lockhart. By sunrise, I had a case number, 2 new best friends in the county jail, and the first solid piece of evidence that Diane Whitaker had lost her damn mind. You'd think that would slow her down. It didn't. A week later, they tried the public shaming route. 12 residents lined up along my fence with poster boards and righteous fury. One sign read, "Don't let one stubborn man endanger our children." Another had a Photoshop picture of an ambulance blocked by my gate. I dragged my lawn chair out, set a cooler beside it, and graded their performance like an Olympic judge. The blonde Bob was back, this time in a visor and a t-shirt that said Community First. She tried to serve me with something called a notice of intent to seek injunctive relief. I used it to wipe the sweat off my neck and told her to send the grown-up paperwork next time. That's when the Oscar-worthy moment happened. A man I'd never seen before marched up in a polo 2 sizes too tight, started screaming about blocked ambulances, then brushed my shoulder with the back of his hand, and threw himself to the ground like he'd been shot by a cannon. He rolled around clutching his face, yelling for somebody to call 911. Half the crowd had their phones up filming before he hit the dirt. My ballcap GoPro had been recording since I sat down. Deputy Rodriguez showed up again, 3rd time in 2 weeks, and asked the magic question, "You got footage, Jack?" I handed him the camera. 30 seconds later, the actor was in cuffs for filing a false report, and the crowd dispersed quieter than a church mouse with a hangover. Round 3 was the boldest yet. 6:30 on a Thursday morning, I heard a diesel rumble that didn't belong. I stepped out of the shop and saw a yellow Caterpillar track excavator crawling along the fence line on the Magnolia Springs side, with 3 men walking beside it like they were about to build the pyramids. One carried a clipboard, one carried survey flags, and one had a can of fluorescent orange spray paint. They were marking my fence posts like they owned them. I walked down slow, phone already dialing the non-emergency line. Clipboard man saw me coming and tried the friendly approach. "Morning. We're just establishing a temporary construction corridor. County approved." I stopped 10 feet away. "Funny. I talked to the county engineer yesterday, and he didn't mention it." His smile faltered. "Spray paint boy put an orange X dead center on my gate post anyway." The excavator operator leaned out of the cab. "We good to start the first cut?" I raised my voice just enough. "Son, the only thing you're cutting today is your own paycheck when the sheriff gets here." 40 minutes later, the county planning director, the sheriff, and 2 deputies were all standing in my driveway, watching the excavator back away like a dog that just got caught in the cat food. The crew left so fast they forgot 2 boxes of survey stakes. That night, everything changed. At 9:17 p.m., I heard footsteps on the gravel. Not the heavy stomp of someone looking for trouble. Hesitant. Scared. The dogs didn't even bark, just raised their heads and watched. I stepped onto the porch with a flashlight and saw a man standing just outside the gate in khakis and a wrinkled button-down, clutching a thick manila envelope like it was a live grenade. "Mr. Harlan, my name's Tom Brennan. I'm the treasurer for Magnolia Springs. I'm not here official. Please." I opened the gate just wide enough for him to step through, then closed it behind him. We stood under the porch light while the cicadas screamed in the cedar trees. He handed me the envelope. "If Diane ever finds out I gave you this, I'm finished. My house, my family, everything." Inside was a thumb drive and 300 pages of printed emails, bank records, invoices, and ledger entries. Tom talked fast and low, the way men do when they're terrified but finally free. "She's been skimming dues for 8 months. Calls it the Community Protection Fund. Hired private contractors to harass you. Paid that guy to fake the assault. Paid for the midnight locksmiths. Paid for the excavator crew. Over $312,000 so far. All off book. She forged my electronic signature on half the transfers. When the auditor started asking questions, she drafted a letter blaming everything on me. Said I'd acted alone. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. I'm not going to prison for her, Jack. I've got 2 little girls. I told him to go home, lock his doors, and not answer his phone until he heard from the sheriff or a lawyer I trusted. He nodded, shook my hand once, and disappeared into the dark. The next morning, I made copies of everything, put the originals in a safety deposit box in San Marcos, and started making phone calls. By noon Saturday, I had 2 folding tables set up at the end of my driveway under a couple of easy-up canopies. I laid out plat maps from 1923, tax receipts going back to 1967, aerial photos, the original developer's disclosure forms with the Southern Access clause circled in red, and laminated blow-ups of the fake court order and the HOA credit card receipt for the angle grinder. I fired up the pit, threw on brisket and sausage, set a jar for tips labeled blade sharpening for veterans, and hung a hand-lettered sign that read, "Come see the paperwork yourself. Coffee's free, truth's pricier." People came. First a trickle, then a river. Old ranchers who remembered my granddaddy. Young couples who just closed on houses in Magnolia Springs and had no idea what they'd signed. Reporters from the Lockhart Post-Register and the San Marcos paper. A deputy who was off duty and just curious. Even a few shame-faced HOA board members who stood at the back trying to blend into the cedar trees. Tom Brennan showed up in jeans and a Longhorns cap pulled low. He didn't say much, just nodded once when our eyes met and took a plate like any other guest. By 3 o'clock the crowd was 200 deep. Kids chased each other around the pecan trees. Somebody brought a cooler of Shiner. The smell of brisket drifted across the county road and pulled in stragglers who didn't even know what the fuss was about. I answered questions until my voice gave out. Showed the same 10 minutes of night vision break-in footage on a loop on my laptop. Let people read the emails for themselves. Never raised my voice once. Didn't have to. The truth was doing all the shouting. Diane Whitaker never showed. Her Facebook groups went dark. The protest signs disappeared overnight. The court hearing was almost anticlimactic. Diane's lawyers filed an emergency petition for a temporary access easement citing public safety. The judge set it for 10 days out. Sarah Delgado, best property attorney between Austin and San Antonio, took my case for the price of a new welder and the promise of brisket for life. On the day of the hearing, the courthouse gallery was standing room only. Diane sat ramrod straight in a navy suit that probably cost more than my truck, surrounded by 3 lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sarah started with the deed, the plat maps, the tax receipts. Then she dimmed the lights and played the break-in video on the big screen. The fake badges. The sparks. The confession in the back of the patrol car. Then the GoPro footage of the fake assault. Then Tom Brennan on the stand reading line by line from Diane's own emails about making the treasurer the fall guy. When Sarah projected the Magnolia Springs purchase contract with the clause "Southern ingress and egress not guaranteed" or implied highlighted in orange, half the gallery actually groaned out loud. The judge took about 4 minutes to deny the petition with prejudice and refer the entire matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Diane turned the color of old dishwater. Her head lawyer started packing his briefcase before the gavel even fell. 3 weeks later, the county auditor froze every Magnolia Springs account. 4 days after that, on a Tuesday morning when the dew was still heavy on the grass, 3 sheriff's SUVs and an unmarked sedan rolled into the cul-de-sac in front of Diane Whitaker's 6,000-square-foot monument to bad taste. She came to the door in yoga pants and a look of pure disbelief while deputies read her rights on the front porch beneath a decorative wooden sign that read Magnolia Springs, a community of harmony. They say the cameras on the Ring doorbells caught the whole thing. I wouldn't know. I was out fixing fence. The HOA was officially dissolved by the state before the wildflowers finished blooming. A court-appointed overseer is still untangling the money. Tom Brennan kept his house and his freedom. Last I heard, he's coaching his daughter's softball team and smiling in public again. These days when I walk the fence line at sunrise, the only thing moving is the occasional whitetail and my 2 mutts who still think they own the place. Neighbors wave when they drive by. Some stop to drop off a jar of peach preserves or a 6-pack and a quiet thank you. The south gate is reinforced with Schedule 80 pipe and a lock the size of a softball. Next to it hangs a small brass plaque, "A friend made in his shop. Private property. HOA is not the law." The land is quiet again. Real quiet. The kind my granddaddy said only comes when a man stands his ground long enough for the ground to decide it's on his side. My land. My rules. And that's the whole story from start to finish. Now I want to hear yours. Have you ever had to draw a line that nobody else wanted to respect? Ever watched a bully finally meet a wall they couldn't climb? Ever been the one holding the flashlight when the truth finally came out? Drop it in the comments. Tell me where you stand on property rights, on entitled neighbors, on what happens when good people stay quiet too long. I read every single one, and I know for a fact some of you have lived this fight in your own zip code. Let's hear it.